Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Tech. My name is Alan. In one of our last videos, we talked about some of the most impressive flagships and command ships in Star Wars history. Now, I know a lot of you guys were upset that I didn't include the Executor and Eclipse Superstar dreadnoughts from the Empire, but the reason is we actually have some sponsor obligations with Geonosian Hive Engineering, a major competitor of Quat Drive Yards. The pandemic has limited her income somewhat, so any help from GHE is appreciated. In the Outer Rim, Geonosian Hive ship drive you. Anyway guys, in our last video while I was doing research about the various flagships in Star Wars history, I noticed a strange trend in which starships were growing progressively larger and larger with each era. Today I thought it'd be kind of cool to look at this evolution in the size of ships and why exactly this happened. Now, for the sake of time, we're going to skip the pre-Old Republic period, simply because there is a lack of information on ships during the Rakatan Infinite Empire's reign. After the fall of the Rakatan, sentient beings in the galaxy struggled to cover vast distances between systems and mostly relied on sleeper ships before the invention of the hyperdrive. Now, I originally assumed that the change and evolution in sizes for ships was a pretty linear path from, the very small Old Republic ships that we'll see in the beginning to the stupid large ones in the First Order fleet. But from what we can tell, as early as 10,000 years before the Battle of Yavin, the Republic Navy was fielding some pretty massive and large ships, including the Cow-class battleship. This was a 3,000 meter long battleship with a design lineage coming from the ancient Outer Rim Kumari Empire. These ships were so old that not only did they feature turbo lasers, they actually had mass drivers, a very large mass driver placed on the entire length of the ship. This is something similar to what we see in Mass Effect, and essentially it's a railgun on steroids. They're basically launching giant hunks of metal out into space. Now, this ship was designed to instill fear, and it was used for planetary bombardment. It is very possible, though, that the Kumari battleship was an outlier in galactic design, similar to what the Supremacy was, which served multiple purposes aside from being Snoke's boudoir. Perhaps a better representation of the size of Republic ships during this period of time would be the Core Galaxy System dreadnoughts. In Earth military lingo, dreadnoughts were basically nicknames for battleships, the largest ships in a fleet, usually. The Core Galaxy System's dreadnoughts served as capital ships for the Old Republic Navy and were around 900 meters long and featured one heavy turbo laser and 16 laser cannons. Now, these ships would obviously be capital ships and command ships for much larger fleets, which would be made up of smaller, probably only a few hundred meter long frigates and cruisers. During the Great Hyperspace War in 5000 BBY, the Sith Empire's fleet was mainly comprised of Delphin-class battleships, which were around 215 meters in length. Now, had these ships been around in the latter periods of Star Wars history, they would have been considered maybe frigates at best. But the Delphin-class battleship was considered quite substantial during the Great Hyperspace War and helped the Sith Empire reach all the way to Coruscant from the Outer Rim. Rounding out their fleet were much smaller 75-meter-long Sith escort gunships. Now, I think the size of the Delphin-class battleship is a pretty good representation of ships during this period of time. If we look at the Koros system fleet, which engaged the Sith Empire during this period, their fleets were mainly made up of Supremacy attack ships, which were around 550 meters. We do have to remember, of course, that the Sith Empire's population and economic output was relatively small compared to the Republic worlds, so it makes sense that their vessels would be a lot smaller. Now, it's very possible that the Sith Empire's fleet was also limited because they lacked orbital shipyards like the ones we see in the Republic, and so they basically had to build their ships on the ground and somehow launch them into the atmosphere. Now, the period of time between 5000 BBY and 1000 BBY was perhaps one of the most terrifying and violent periods of Star Wars history. The Republic would see multiple galaxy-wide wars against the Sith, numerous civil wars within Jedi and Sith factions, and several Cold Wars that shattered the galactic economy and isolated large portions of the Republic from Coruscant. It was also during this time period that we saw the Republic absorb more territory and lesser empires, and at the same time establish a federal navy and rely on that instead of planetary defense forces. The signature ship of the Old Republic during this period was the Hammerhead bridge design. These ships were heavily focused on frontal attacks and heavily featured heavy armor and armament at the front of the ship. Yet ships like the Praetorian-class frigate, which was 180 meters in length, and the Thatra corvette, which would go on to replace it. These smaller ships were generally used in an escort role or for screening enemy fighters from larger capital ships. At the core of the Old Republic Navy was the 315-meter-long Hammerhead-class cruiser. These ships were the line served as the backbone of the Republic Navy all the way until the New Sith War 3,000 to 4,000 years later. For command ships, the Old Republic Navy would utilize larger ships like the 600-meter Interdictor-class cruiser, which was also classified as a destroyer by some military historians. Then you had the even larger Inexpugnable-class tactical command ship, which was 3,100 meters in diameter, making it easily the largest Old Republic Navy ship. While these command ships were massive and equal to size to the Lucre Hulk battleships we would see during the Clone Wars, we have to remember that the 315-meter-long Hammerhead class was still the most common ship of the line, performing a role similar to what the Venator-class Star Destroyer would have had during the Clone Wars or the Imperial-class Star Destroyer during the Galactic Civil War. Now, it's during this time that we would see the Sith embrace the concept of larger and larger vessels because, hey, they love destruction. During the Great Galactic War, the Sith wielded a massive fleet of Harrower-class dreadnoughts, which were around 800 meters, and more than twice the size of the Hammerhead cruiser. These ships had 32 turbo lasers, making them very similar in function to an Imperial-class Star Destroyer. These were clearly battleships designed to exchange turbo laser fire at close ranges. It was actually said that Palpatine designed the Imperial-class Star Destroyer after the Harrower. Then you had the Centurion-class battlecruiser, which, like the Interdictor, originally was created for the Republic Navy, but after the fall of Revan, was used by the Sith as well. The Centurion battlecruiser was 1,200 meters long and designed to replace the Expungable-class command ship. Although it was similar in size to the Imperial-class Star Destroyer, the Centurion only had 6 medium turbo lasers and 6 heavy ion cannons, which means it was more outfitted like a Venator-class Star Destroyer because it also had a very large complement of fighters on board. The millennia before the Ruusan Reformation occurred was widely considered the Dark Ages of the galaxy. It was a period of time that saw constant warfare between the Sith and the Jedi, the destruction of large portions of the galaxy's infrastructure and communication links. Entire worlds were lost and regressed to primitive societies. The Jedi Order and Galactic Republic had to make extreme sacrifices and changes to their organizations in order to survive. Technology itself stagnated, and the design of ships and military weapons also regressed. The Ruusan Reformation finally signaled an end to this very dark period in Star Wars history, and it ushered in an era of demilitarization, peace, and economic expansion. This golden age of the Republic also limited the need for larger military ships. After the disbanding of the Federal Navy, the galaxy once again returned to the dependence on local defense forces. One of the few ships that were mass-produced for the Galactic Republic was the Dreadnought-class heavy cruiser, which were 600-meter-long battleships, a clear reduction in size from the 1,200-meter-long Centurion-class and 800-meter-long Harrower-class. The Republic really didn't deploy any large dreadnoughts during this period, but what you did have were rich shipyard worlds like Huat, which had large command vessels in their own fleets. The Procurator-class battlecruiser was the first of its class and the flagship of the Kuat Defense Force. It was 2,500 meters long and would be the first of many massive super-class destroyers that would later dominate the galaxy. The size and armament of these early battlecruisers, however, would be severely limited by demilitarization and the regulations in place to make sure that large, massive ships were not being built. The creation of the Free Trade Zone in the outer rim of the galaxy was done in order to encourage more capital investment in this area of the galaxy. This essentially led to large corporate entities privatizing entire systems. Now, these corporations were forced to provide safety and security for their worlds and shipping lanes, and so they began outfitting merchant ships with weapons and armor and shields. By the start of the Clone Wars in 22 BBY, the Confederacy of Independent Systems Navy was made up of mostly converted merchant ships. At the core of this navy was the Munificent-class Star Frigate, a heavily automated 825-meter-long ship that was originally designed to haul freight and then eventually was required for escort duty and anti-piracy patrols. The Lucre Hulk series, which was 3,000 meters in diameter, was a cargo freighter that was upgraded into a battleship as well. Its massive internal hangars could carry a ridiculous amount of war material, including millions of battle droids. It should be noted, like here on Earth, merchant ships are much larger on average than military vessels, simply because scaling up the amount of cargo you haul will increase profits. This means at the outset of the Clone Wars, the average CIS Navy ship was massive. This was followed by even larger military vessels like the 1,000 and 2,000 meter variants of the Providence-class dreadnought and the 4,845 meter long Subjugator-class heavy cruiser. In response, the Galactic Republic Navy, which was made up of assault carriers and smaller frigates, they basically had to upscale their own ships of the line. The Venator-class Star Destroyer, which was around 1,200 meters in length, was very similar in design and function and size to the Centurion battlecruisers of the Old Republic period. It was by far the most common capital ship used by the Republic. And when the Galactic Empire came to power, it would also be replaced by the Victory-class Star Destroyer and eventually the 1,600-meter-long Imperial-class Star Destroyer. Now, these massive battleships would take more cues from the Sith Empire's Harrower-class Star Destroyers and feature large banks of turbolasers. At the same time, Emperor Palpatine was overseeing large nationalization projects of many of the resources in the galaxy and many industries. He was also trying to expand the military-industrial complex and expand the military in general. And so the Galactic Republic military would experience tremendous growth during this period of time. Palpatine would go on to embrace the Tarkin Doctrine, which heavily favored impressive and large starships that were supposed to, in theory, scare the populace into submission. Quad Drive Yards started pumping out larger and larger battlecruisers until we have the Super Star Dreadnought classes like the Executor class and the Eclipse Command Ship that would become Palpatine's own personal ship. Now, these dreadnoughts could be up to 12 kilometers long, which made them essentially flying cities. They're basically the size of Manhattan Island, but this fully embrace the Sith concept of rule through fear and strength. But these weren't necessarily the most financially and strategically wise decisions. Time and time again, the Rebellion and Resistance, which would fight the Imperial Remnant First Order faction, would show us that smaller starfighters equipped with precision munitions could disable and even destroy these large vessels. So if you take a look at the first 10,000 years we talk about, the size of the average ship of the line didn't change much. I mean, they generally range from the 200 to the 500 meter length. And I think it really depended on which faction you were looking at when it came to size, more than just the evolution of time. But from the Clone Wars till the First Order Resistance War, which was about a 50-year period of time, you did see a massive increase in the size of ships, mainly because the Galactic Empire was able to consolidate the entire galaxy under its control and also expand its military to a massive amount. You also had that Tarkin Doctrine kind of mentality, which really ended up building and creating very, very massive ships. Anyway, let me know in the comment section below what you think about our theory of the evolution of size of ships. And also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rest of our awesome content. And as usual, thanks for joining us today. If you're watching this, you are Generation Tech.